here today. Is there anybody that is here that has never been in caucus before? So stand up and introduce yourself. If you've never been here before, stand up and introduce yourself. Anybody? Alrighty then. I want to thank Councilman Marcus Winkler, District 17. Yes, for the booth. Also, I am going to say that respectfully, if you are not a Metro Council member, please respect the council members first for all our guests. Make sure that they eat first before y'all just dive in or somebody brings you a plate or whatever. I wouldn't be me if I didn't say that. We want to make sure this is out of every council person's pocket. This doesn't come out of taxpayers' dollars. Just want to make sure that everybody is well aware of that the council members and their aides give them an opportunity to eat first. Thank you. So we also, I was wondering why my colleague Ken Herndon was dressed up. He had a birthday, he got a birthday coming up.
You're saying that's his birthday suit?
Yeah, so he wanted to put on his birthday suit today for us guys. So then I'm going to go straight into the approval of the minutes for Thursday, May the 14th. All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, moving right along. Oh, you're right on time. Moving right along, in our big questions, by some members as far as where we're at, as far as the recommendation for J.P. Lyninger, and of course, after the review of the rules, everyone is not here. Josie is not here today, and Councilman Don Purvis is going to be extremely late today, so we will not be discussing that today. The rules say that everyone has to be here in order for us to vote, so we're going to move forward. And if anybody do not have anything that they want to address or say about that, I'm going to give the floor to someone.
Sorry, not about that. Sorry.
Okay.
Not about that.
Okay, all right. So being that that's done, we're not going to discuss that today. So I just want to let any and everybody that's contacted me just to know that it's not up for discussion right now. And moving forward, is there anybody else that wants to speak on something else?
Yeah, I was going to talk about the budget. If you give me a couple
yes,
minutes.
great.
So, appreciate everybody sending their stuff in. Kevin and I have had an initial meeting. A couple of things I think strategically that I'd like to ask the group and would like to get your input on. First of all, I think we know the budget's going to be pretty challenging. I mean, I think that when you look at what's in there, I mean, you could argue functionally, there's some imbalances that exist already because we've got about $3 million of opioid money that's paying for stuff that we would normally be doing anyway, so that's a little bit of a challenge, and then we took $9 million out of the risk fund. So that puts pressure onto next year's budget, right? And then you add to that the mayor's proposal to basically borrow $150 million, that debt load next year will come off the top, right, before we even get to the revenue figures, and so that will constrain next year's budget. So I think, being a little bit prudent of what we're doing, scaling back the capital budget a little bit from the mayor's proposal probably makes sense, just so that we've got some room next year. And then, working to free as much money as possible in the operating budget to get the stuff funded that folks have asked for. One of the things that I would love to advocate for, would love to get, since I know last year kind of went back and forth with the trust fund, okay? And, I think it's very likely that, there'll be a push again to cut it from 15, probably to 12.5 or 10. What I would like to hold the line on and want to see if everybody would support is, if we move it from 15 to 12.5, but that 2.5 then stays in the safe and stable housing framework. So it would be down payment assistance, the Safe and Stable Innovation Fund, and then home repairs for home repair fund. So, we'd still be at 15 towards affordable housing, although not all 15 would be in the trust fund. So, want to sort of pressure test that when we go on, see what you think.
Hold on one second, I had you.
Still, it's not.
Okay, I guess you have this, okay, all right.
I don't hate the idea. I think keeping it within the safe and stable is important and good. I would like to see some of those fully funded or close to fully funded, some of the other things within safe and stable. So I don't know where we are.
That would basically, I sat down with Liz and George the other day, and I think basically that framework would essentially fully fund all of the other asks.
It would.
Or come within razor close to fully funded. So yes.
Especially if we're fully funding the other ones, then I think it's a little bit more palatable to me to cut it from the trust fund. But again, I'd rather have it all fully funded.
Thank you. I see this as robbing Peter to pay Paul out of the trust fund, talking about lumping these funds together and linking them about what we're paying for when we're not examining. We've got a 6% increase in the police budget, which is the largest outlay in Metro Council. If we held police spending flat, we wouldn't have to worry about anything in terms of what we're spending on addressing housing as a crisis. I think, I'm not going to act like I'm naive about what votes are on that, but I just want to say here in this public forum that that's not how I would address it, and I think that it would be smarter for us to hold the line there. Because, again, that is the largest outlay already. We've got a 6% increase. We've got an overall cut to our total spending in this budget. Social services are being cut. While we are also, as you pointed out, doing some deficit spending on capital. And we are going to be we're going to have a higher debt ratio. We're going to do more deficit spending. We're borrowing at rates that are not as advantageous as they were in the past. In my budget town halls, I've said, I'm going to shock you. Here I am, a socialist, saying I'm worried about our debt spending. But I am a little bit. And I think this is an example of us, choosing to, kind of narrow the policy framework and say, well, this is housing and this is housing, and let's move some money around to make sure that we stay whole as far as this cut goes, in anticipation of what's going to come out of the second floor. And I think that we would be better served talking about public safety holistically, those sorts of things. But I'm aware of what the appetite is.
Yeah, just real quick, just straight out, are you saying, Jay, take it from the police?
I think that I'm well on the record on that.
I need to know. So I'm asking like straight to the, I ain't cutting around the bush. I'm just saying, take it from the police. If we're gonna take it from anybody.
I would cut LSPD,
Okay.
I would cut the mayor's budget.
Okay.
The mayor's office has another increase. There's been huge administrative load across the street. Talking about, we're talking about $1.5 million again for walking around money on Louisville, that they've admitted that they're going to be asking in perpetuity. When, as you pointed out, next year we're likely to see an austerity budget from across the street.
Yeah. So,
all right, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe sort of two comments. One, I think the point about the capital budget is really important because when the mayor presented the budget, he said, well, we're going to front load this year's capital budget, and then we'll see smaller capital budgets in the future. And maybe that's true, but I think we need to be realistic on how much smaller they can. They're not like, we are on record for funding paving for $30 million, right? I don't think that's going to change next year. So it's not like next year's capital budget is going to be $15 million, right? You're $30 million in paving before you start, okay? You're going to do, your standard vehicle replacement, that's another, call it $6 to $9 million. So before we really even do anything else, right? We're at 40 million, okay? And that doesn't include the trust fund, Chris Sight testified he's gonna ask for a significant amount in next year's budget for the data center rebuild, right? Not people use data center for it. So, but the IT infrastructure around the EMA system, right?
Yeah.
So,
We still put those words together.
the EMA computers. Okay. So, while I think realistically, right, while the capital budget next year might, where historically it's been 90, maybe it's lower, but it's not going to be 40, right? Maybe it's 80 or 85. And so I think we just need to be prepared that, if we're going to borrow $150 million this year, like, we're not borrowing 40 next year, right? Or the year after that. It's still going to be in the 75 to 85 range if I were guessing, right? And I think we just need to be realistic about that so that we're not, putting ourselves in a position where, then we really do have to make cuts because we don't have enough operating money to, pay for parks mowing or library service or whatever else. I think to your point about LEDA, I think the mayor has talked about this, and actually I reached out to the county attorney this week. We've got the option of adding a 3% rental car tax that could fund. It has to be. I know Laura sent me the email, and I haven't read it yet, so I won't use the correct language around what it has to be used to fund. But that is a revenue source so you could pull that $3 million functionally off the books, right? So yes, it would be an ongoing ask, but it would theoretically have a revenue stream.
All right. Is that all on this topic? Thanks, Marcus, for all that you do. Go ahead.
Our caucus rules say if we're going to attempt to change the caucus rules, the potential change has to be brought up in a meeting before that it can be voted on subsequently. And so I'm going to make a motion to change the caucus rules and remove Rule 3.II from the caucus rules. And thus, 3.III will become 3.II. And that's the change. Do I have a second?
Before everybody, I think you need to look at the rule, okay? That is not in front of us. And I also want to say this, before everybody start jumping and saying yes to this rule, and I'm not saying that I want to be on the bandwagon to saying yes to the rule, right? I want you all to be very aware of what happens when this rule is off the table. Okay? As your caucus leadership, when it's off the table, anything goes. There you go.
For those of us who don't know the rules by memory, what the rule is, and which would be changed.
I just wanted to put that out there. I can take it. I can take anything goes. Hold up, y'all. I can take anything goes, right? But I don't think that it would be fair to my colleagues. You need to have a full understanding of what anything goes when our president puts something on the table like that. So, I would ask that everybody look over that rule, okay? And we go from there. I apologize.
No, that's all right. I'm saying, we're not voting on it tonight. We're just,
Yeah, I know, I'm just
merely
saying.
putting it on the table. And it
He's
doesn't
putting it
have to be
on the
voted
table.
on at the next caucus meeting. It's just, it can't be voted, but it can't be voted on at a subsequent caucus meeting after this. And at the end of the day, it will take so many votes to do it. And just so we're clear on it, it relates to, there's a couple different threes. This is under the discipline action. The one specifically related to you. And so think about it. Okay?
Can you have in front of you that you can read or
So the rule that he's referencing is under council member discipline or separation of the caucus, is the one that he's stating is in question right now. It is the following circumstances may provide a basis to suspend or expel a member of the Democratic Caucus. Number 2 says working to defeat an incumbent member of the caucus in a Metro Council primary or general election.
Sort of strike that rule.
So it would strike that rule is the way I understand.
Yes, strike it completely, move from 3 to 2.
So if I so just so we're clear, you know, I just wanna dumb that down just a little bit, you know, for you, President, you know, just so we're clear and just have understanding, you know, 'cause we do have two people that's not here. And that is that, let's say if Councilman Herman, who has an election coming up in 2 years, I'm on the inside and I can work against him as his colleague.
Yes, because right now, 3 point, double lowercase I.
And there's nothing that you can do about if I decide to work against you. I just wanted to be clear with that, just so everybody knows, because I don't want nobody to say, I didn't understand, I didn't know what that meant, I didn't know what I was voting on. You know, again, I can stand the rain. But,
I think JP was first. Okay. Wow, that face.
I gave the floor.
So, for people who were here when that rule was introduced, just so I'm 100% clear, why was that rule introduced? What was the problem we were trying to solve?
Barbara can probably answer
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
What happened was we had someone running for office, and one of the aides were working against that person. So when they put the law in, they were going to actually put the council person out with their name. And, they, finally came down to this one. But they said that that person should be able to control their aid. And so that's why it was really good. And he said we had to mess this up. He's back to but the aid, he knew that the aid was running against, working hard against this person coming out. And so that's how it got started, and they decided to put that rule in place. But like I said, they were gonna put that council person out with their aid, and they changed it.
But, if I could, but the intention was that, what was it that was happening? Like, was a council person working against another city council person?
It's the aid.
Just the aid, okay.
Aid is doing it.
The LA,
The
the
LA, yeah.
legislative
Yeah.
aid
Right, the aid.
to the
Okay.
council.
And the rule wasn't intended to stop. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Would you entertain an amendment just for cleanliness, also under discipline section 4, that we also strike that, as it pertains to the aides?
That I take a look at it. We're not gonna decide that on the fly. If
I understand. I'm
the second, that also would be going into consideration. But on the
So
fly.
we would need a
I'm not
separate
going to-
Right, it's a separate vote, let's don't intertwine the two.
It is,
Right.
I mean, I can make it, I can make it.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying, I don't want that to get caught up, if you wanna make that amendment, you can make that
Well-
amendment, but let's do it if, we don't wanna get nobody confused on what's going on.
It is gonna need to be addressed,
Yeah.
there's 3 sections in here that deal with political activity.
Yes.
This one, the one that I just read, and there's one on Kyle and I, that we can't, Kyle and I, we can't as caucus staff work to defeat anybody. That's an automatic firing for us. But what he's referencing says a caucus member or member staff shall not participate in the campaign of or activity support by action or financial gift the political opponent of a city caucus member running for re-election. So it's the same thing.
Right,
That's-
that's
So
why I'm
that's
saying, I
like-
think if you're gonna remove one, you really need, for
You need to
cleanliness
remove-
sake,
Removing one, you need to remove the other.
So is that saying like, you can't, like I couldn't give Ken money for his campaign?
What it's saying is, if someone ran against Ken, you cannot support that member, that person's campaign as Ken, and your aide cannot.
Okay.
And so, removing 3-2 without removing 4, I think you create a situation where in the rules, it would still be against the rule, but there is no discipline for breaking. I think if we're going to remove the discipline.
What to be for full Candace,
I'll roll.
he,
You'll second Thank you.
Second accept?
Listen, y'all, gonna turn into a serious game that you're laughing now, I promise you, will cry later. Go ahead, Andrew.
So, I'm not gonna be here, but.
Yeah, I know you're not.
But clearly, this rule was passed, so we did not have open season on each other in this room.
Yeah.
And I think the rule is important. At the same time, I seconded it because I think it needs to be considered in the context of JP's situation. So I think the two things need to be considered side by side. We either have rules that we enforce, or we don't. And if we don't, it is not going to be a pretty picture here. I promise you that. I won't be suffering that like you guys will be, but I strongly encourage you to think about what that rule does. Listen, it's open season outside of this room. I mean, that is going to be open season no matter what. And so we're all going to deal with that. But having it inside this room, wow. And then having to try to work together, wow. Good luck.
Alrighty then. So, do anyone have anything else to say about this subject? Maybe you could, chew on those two things that was brought to the table. Do some homework and always come back to the next meeting. Nothing has to be voted on immediately.
I just want to point out that I think there's a clear intent to marry these two issues to say you've got a choice A or a choice B, you've got to take one of the two of them. If that's how people want to see that, that's certainly the prerogative of the body. I think there's actually much more. Matt, go ahead. I think that there's a much broader universe out there than that binary choice. However, I'm happy with that binary choice because I think that the rule is wrong. I think the rule presents us as a corrupt body to the public, and it lowers public trust in us as an institution. I would point out that this rule does not exist in Congress. This rule does not exist in the Kentucky State Legislature Democratic Caucus. This is a rule that solely exists in this room, and that the idea that the sky is going to fall if we are honest with our constituents about who we believe is best suited for an office, I just don't buy that.
Okay, I would use for just one second. I'm gonna say, I do believe that they should go hand in hand as well. Again, I'm gonna say this. For me, all my colleagues, I want to be able to have a good relationship with my colleagues. I want to be able to trust. Whether we agree or whether we don't agree, to me, it's not up to whether you think that I'm a good council person or not. It is up to the people that we represent, not our colleagues, right? I'm your leader today, but if I don't, win my race, I won't be. So what would be first important to me is my constituents. You understand what I'm saying? Not my colleagues, right? So it's not about what your colleagues think about you. It's what the people who vote to us in these seats think, right? And I do think it's a smack in the face if we have our colleagues, advocating for somebody else because they think, right? It's not about what the people think, because the people are the ones that have to go to the polls, right? I think this is primarily about what our colleagues think. I can think Brent's horrible as fuck. Excuse my French. I can think he's horrible. But guess what? I don't live in his district, right? I don't get to go behind the polls and vote for him, right? So who am I to think, so what? Doesn't matter what I think. I need to be worried about the district that I serve, not trying to beat my colleague over her out, right? So it just kind of puts you in a place, we need to mind the business, help everybody while we can, right? But definitely mind the business of our own districts. That's what matters, and help who you can, when you can in their district. But fighting against another colleague in their district, whether I can feel like Brent's horrible, but it's not up to me. I'm not the judge of the jury that decides who puts him in that seat. It's the people that vote for us. That's just my opinion, but I agree wholeheartedly, that it is up to the people who serves, right? And apparently everybody sitting around the table is who was elected thus far, right? But I believe they need to go ahead. Can't have one without the other. Because if you have one without the other, then it's a loophole, right? Then you can have your A do it, right? So either they go paired up, or, you know, and we roll with nothing on the table. I'm just saying, you know, you're only as good as your weakest link. You know, and everybody ain't gonna be able to stand right. That's all I'm just saying. You know, we can go either way for me. We can have the rule, we ain't gotta have the rule. Either way, I'm gonna be able to stand it. Question is other people who may not be able, who have different districts, right, may not be able to take it, you know. And I don't care if I agree with you all or disagree with you all, you know, and I say it all the time. I know more people in District 1 than I do in District 5. I put it right on my post, you know, but I'm not gonna fight, you know, against my colleague, no matter what I may think, right? So I just wanted to get that out. We gotta know what we voting on, guys, you know, because it's just, you know, I don't know. We ain't gonna be, you know, we might be the minority. Go ahead.
I would say this, feel free to correct me if I'm incorrect. When you say this is a rule that only exists in this room, I believe that you are incorrect on that. I can't tell you about Congress, I can't tell you about the state legislature, I have not researched that. But I believe the DSA has a policy that in order to be endorsed by the DSA and be supported by the DSA, you must support and endorse the other DSA candidates. Unlike our rule that says, our rule does not say I have to endorse you. It just says I cannot work against you. So when you say it doesn't exist, when it doesn't exist anywhere else, I'm saying that I think you might be wrong. And if I am right, the DSA rule takes even a step further in requiring support. I know that you had to hire people and you had to do things in order to negotiate a deal to get that endorsement. And there's requirements placed upon you for that. And so, if you want to tell me I'm wrong, I'd love to hear wrong.
Hold on. Did you want to chime in first?
No, I mean, Brett made my point about it doesn't require endorsement. I mean, and I think that's a key basis. And I think, Barbara, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, to me, you know, the rule is fundamental to the group because, I mean, the basis of any sort of team is a foundation of trust, and trust is based on open and honest communication. It's very hard for me to communicate with somebody who is actively working against me, right? And I believe the rule change to include LAs came because LAs often see the communications that maybe are going back and forth between council people, and I believe in LA was actively using that in the public sphere to then defeat a call, right? That's my understanding of the history of that rule, and that's why it was expanded to LAs. And so for me, it is a foundation of trust and open and honest communication, right? And that's very hard to do if the person I'm communicating with is actively running a campaign against me, right? And I do, so I disagree with your point about transparency, because transparency would be, if it were, to Brent's point, if it required, you had to endorse everybody in the room, right? And protect our seats. That's not what the rule says. The rule doesn't say you must go out and door knock, you must contribute to their campaign, you must publicly advocate for them. It doesn't say any of that, right? It just says you can't actively work against them. And again, I think that is to protect communication. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, what I wanted to correct is that Brent has made an unfortunate conflation between this Democratic Caucus and a nonprofit which chooses how they want to endorse in electoral campaigns. If you wanted to try to make a comparison to, say, the Louisville Democratic Party or the Kentucky Democratic Party, that would be a more apt comparison than talking about the Democratic Caucus here. But I would say it was still faulty because you're still talking about an organization that's making, fraud endorsements. KDP doesn't do that. The LDP now does, although I kind of argue against that from the party perspective. Certainly in the first round, I think we were on the scale in the first round. It's a mistake, and everyone. But it's not the same thing when you compare the Democratic Caucus to a nonprofit that's choosing who they're endorsing and how they want the people that they're endorsing to act as a slate.
I don't really see that it's that different, honestly. The state statute makes us have a caucus, but there's nothing that says everybody has a birthright to belong to that caucus. It is a coalition of the willing, and we make our own rules. So in that
I'm not
sense,
disagreeing with that.
so in that sense,
I'm saying conflating,
Ron, he's got the floor. You got it
well,
right.
that's really all I wanted to say. I don't see how it's all that different. I mean, we're just a group of people that are a part of a coalition of the willing, that we hopefully lift each other up and work toward common goals. But beyond that, we make our own rules, and we either have rules that we enforce or we don't.
Okay, and I have to look into some, okay, we got Marcus and then we got Shamika, but maybe I'm wrong or somebody, I don't know everything, I'm not the smartest one at the table, but does nonprofits, and JP, you may be able to answer this, I thought nonprofits, if they're a 501c3, wasn't able or to be involved in politics. I didn't even know that the DSA was a nonprofit, that's the first,
They're
so
not.
educate me on it.
yeah. So 501c4s and 501c3s have different rules in terms of
Okay,
whether they've been endorsed or not. That's why you have fairness versus CFAIR and different rules about what organizations and what their role is in terms of tax policy
okay,
and whether they're able to endorse political races.
okay, so they're 501c4?
Seafarers.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so-
Marcus and then
Yeah,
Shamika.
so I'll maybe make a different analogy, right? So the DSA may or may not be an apt analogy, but, most, if not all of us, have at some point in our lives worked in a company, right? Whether it's, when you're 15 working at McDonald's or, 45 working at Humana. And we've been on a team, and chances are you didn't get to choose your team, right? Like nobody picked their entire team. When you're on that team, there are certain expectations of rules, right? Now, I can go to my boss and say, hey, I hate working with Ben, right? I don't like working with Ben. We don't have a good relationship, right? And that's a conversation I have with my boss. If I start going out and actively working to get Ben fired, right? I'm gonna guess that is not good for overall team dynamics, team cohesion, and probably not a strategy that keeps me on the team very long, right? And so that's the analogy that I would use as just a general team dynamic and workplace appropriateness.
Shamika.
As someone who came into this council with the Democratic nomination and my predecessor openly endorsed the independent candidate, I experienced that my issue with a lot of our rules is that they don't seem equitable. And I wonder about the legality of saying you can't donate and you can't do this. Now, I do understand, thank you, Ms. Shanklin, for that context of why this rule came about, because that's what I thought about when I read it. But I'm also a graduate of Emerge Kentucky, and we make a commitment that as Emerge Kentucky graduates, we don't openly run against another Emerge graduate. We have joined that sisterhood. So I do understand the caucus having its rules. My thing is that, is it equal, is it equitable in how we apply it? And that's what, I think that it's some flaws in there. And as somebody who worked in advocacy and organizing, and I'm a part of a nonprofit that has both C4 and C3, but before I came on the council, I've known of council people not openly helping to get somebody out, but indirectly, even making donations through people, through family members for another opponent. So it hasn't eliminated people working, it's just, so it is about the communication to me and people being able to do it. So I think that I understand the makings of these rules, but I think in this present context, I don't think that they stand up because they haven't been equitable. And I'm saying that from my personal experience. It hasn't been equitable in how we go after people. I mean, of course, I didn't file any complaints and all of that stuff. I don't usually take that route unless I got to, but it's not, I've seen people, even since I've been here these last 3 years, who clearly support other people, but they're in the same caucus. It's still happening. And so I just think that we need to make sure that these rules are applicable to what we're dealing with now. And like Andrew and others, and a couple others, I won't be here, but I do want to make sure while I'm here, and it's my turn, that we're doing what's right by people. And I'm also very proud of my endorsement, which I did seek my own party's endorsement first, and I'm proud of that DSA endorsement. But when I took that endorsement, I agreed that I would support all of those candidates. So I could be in the hot seat next after you.
Yeah, and I will say this, I want to make this clear. There were two complaints filed. The first one, you know, was the picture, you know, and JP explained that. Then, you know, when he doubled down and said what he said to the news and said, yeah, I did it. I think that's where it took another turn, because you want to talk about pictures. I mean, Shamika, you was on there with my candidate. You know what I'm saying? You was just cheesing with the girls where it gets beat. I'm not gonna go foul nothing. I don't care. Like I said, you know, if y'all wanna be outside and do it, let's get it. It's no biggie, right? But yeah, just know what you're getting into, and don't come running to me when you vote saying, oh, such and such is doing this. Because then I'm gonna look back at that vote and I'm gonna say, and sometimes you just never know the candidate that is running, what type of games they may be playing. You know, they may be like, here, let me take a picture with you real quick. You know, you just never know. So you really gotta look at it. But I think the whole picture thing and, you know, and all of that, that's one thing. But I think, you know, when I get, and this, let me be honest with you all. This is something that's, you know, this is new. This has not happened in Metro government in I believe, like history. With somebody filing a complaint, you know, to the caucus chair to take action like this, right? So the you know.
You did it with Dan Johnson,
Yeah, Dan Johnson. So how long ago has that been?
2017.
17. Okay, right. So you know, it's for me. It's just like it's new for me, right? But whatever you all choose to do, you know, I work for you all. You know, like I said, we can roll with doing away with the rules. We can, you know, we can change them. We can dumb them down, but if we're gonna have rules, we enforce the rules that are in front of us, right? If we're not gonna enforce them, you know, let's do all of us a favor and throw them out the window. I'm okay with that. I got Marcus, then I got Andrew, then I got Barbara, then I got JP. In that order.
So there have been issues that have risen to the surface since I've been on council, and an official,
Okay.
hold on. An official, something wasn't officially filed. But
Oh.
conversations were had.
Okay.
And, you know, the issues were decided amongst ourselves. And there was expression of, sorry, I did that, I won't do it again. My issue here was that, not that that happened in the first place, but that when you were confronted, that you basically said, I'm doubling and tripling down on this thing, and do something if you dare. And that's when I had a problem. Because before that, look, this is such a low bar. You guys understand that this rule that we're talking about right now is the lowest possible bar that we can have not to go after each other. You're exactly right. Of course people have a preferred candidate. Of course they work in ways, but they don't do it so damn publicly. They don't do it so damn aggressively because of the rule, which I think is probably a pretty good thing. So that's why I'm pretty adamant about, we either need to have a rule that we enforce, or we need to not have a rule at all. That's why I.
So what you're, just so we're clear, what you're saying is that you had a concern with JP about the same issue, and you went to him and talked to him about it. You didn't file anything.
No. I'm saying since I've been on council,
Okay.
there have been a few places where people were concerned that somebody was kind of working against somebody else.
Right.
And leadership took care of it kind of internally. People talked about it. They said, I got it. I know I broke the rule. I'm sorry. Won't happen. That's the way to take care of it. That's not what happened, right?
Okay.
In my understanding, that's not what happened here. And that's when it became a bigger issue for me, right? I didn't have so much of a problem with it at first. It was only after the newspaper and some of the comments beyond that, where I was like, we either have a rule or we don't. And if you have a rule, you gotta enforce it. And if you're not gonna enforce it, then you should do it.
Understood. I'm sorry, Councilwoman Shanklin.
The way I look at it is, everybody's pretty much has their own rules. It's like, Shamika just said, they have their rules. We know our rules here. If you can't follow the rules here, then you need to go. Then just go on. I mean, won't be truthful and say what's in my heart. It was 17 people that voted to put that rule in place because we felt like it was tearing the policy apart, what was going on. And if we don't have a rule, we're gonna tear it apart again. It's already there. It's already there. And And what you said about merge, they cannot go in, there are two in my district in the same merge group. And so, they have rules, but they still doing what they want. But every place has their own rules, and this is our rule. 17 people voted to put that rule in place. And everybody that's here knew we had rules in place. No one will follow the rules. You don't play the game this week. That's the only thing I can think of, because we all council people, and that's our job, to come in here and work together, or whatever. I mean, if we don't have no rules, everything goes.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to respond to, a couple of things from Marcus's points. One, about the issue with LA's having access to emails and understanding some back and forths and where they see that, people are out of line with what they believe is the public value. Those are all open records. And anybody in this room, whether they're in LA, whether they're members of the media, can ask for our records, look at all of those communications, they're all public record. So I don't really think that that enters into it that much personally. But what I do agree with you on is that when you have a problem, that you go to the boss. And as Tammy eloquently pointed out, voters are the boss.
Yeah.
That's who we appeal to, because that's who we work for. We don't work for each other, we don't work for the administration, we work for the public and for the public interest. And I would say that the thing that my constituents like second best about me behind my hair is that I am an aggressively honest person, and that I made commitments that I was going to be extremely honest with the public, and that included in this area. And those are the people I'm answering to. The other thing I would like to point out, the difference between the scenario that Andrew mentioned about people going to you, like, let's have a conversation, and he's upset that I, doubled down with the paper of record. Paper of record was in the room the first time the conversation happened. And again, as I've already pointed out, I'm not gonna lie. Killian had the complaint and asked me point blank, is this who you support? Is this who you think should run for this seat? That is what happened. And so, I was honest with Killian, because again, I am an honest person.
All right. Oh, JP, you done?
Sure, that's not it. But it's not about being honest or not being honest. It's about saying, I don't like the rule. So instead of going and getting 7 members of my caucus to change the rule, I'm going to break the rule knowingly, and then tell the rest of the caucus to go fuck themselves and throw me out of there. I mean, that's very different than being honest or not being honest. That's saying, I'm not going to follow this rule. I'm not going to try to build a coalition to change the rule, which is what should have happened here in the first place. That's the problem. It's not honest or not.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to the timeline of events and the difference between the ideal scenario that you described and what occurred in this case. As I mentioned in my response to President Ackerson's complaint, I do not believe that I was in violation of the rule until that conversation with Killian. And I would have maintained that. I don't believe that I was in violation. But because the first time that we ever had a conversation about it was here in a public setting, in an open meeting, and Killian, as the reporter on this beat for the paper of record, was completely aware of the entire complaint, and then asked me point blank, who do you support?
Well, and I'm going to say this just real quick, hold that thought. I'm going to say that normally with a complaint like this, it would come to the caucus chair. This is normally confidential, supposed to be. Our president handled it the way he wanted to handle it, and gave the complaint to everyone. The first one, and then I don't know about the second. Okay.
Well, I think it's, when you say normally, You yourself sitting in this chair at first said this is the first time it happened. And then you were reminded it was actually the second time it happened because of Dan Johnson. So you can't say this is normally how it happens because clearly it hasn't happened but once in a blue moon.
Right, when I say normally, what I'm saying is that how it is found. When the Dan Johnson incident happened, what JP's saying is that he responded the way that he responded because of how it was put out. Right, what I'm saying is, you know, I know you feel like it doesn't matter how it was put out. It was found, right? But normally, if I'm not mistaken, Aaron, you correct me if I'm wrong, you can file it whatever way you want to file it, or do you file it to the Democratic Caucus?
Are we talking about caucus
complaint.
rules, complaints, or
Yeah, the
filed
complaint, yes.
to the leadership of the
Right,
Democratic Caucus?
it was, right, and when I read it, it would be filed to me. It wouldn't be given to the body. So what JP is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is he said what he said because when you handled it, you didn't just give it to me and then let me work that away. You gave it to everybody, and when you gave it to everybody, it allowed it just to be open season.
Can I address that? The
Yeah.
confidentiality provision or rules speaks to you and Jennifer reviewing the complaint, not really what President Ackerson does with the
Okay.
complaint once he files it with you. He can give it to everybody.
Okay. Okay, then I apologize about that.
And I would think, based on what you told us here today about full transparency, you would not want it to be just sort of hidden to the chair or vice chair. You would want it out there based upon what you told us here today.
I have no problem with it being out there. I'm responding to Andrew's feeling that it wasn't handled properly, and I was explaining the differences between, you know, not having a chance for, you know, private conversations and things like that. Jim, I don't believe that I was in violation of the rule up to that point.
Okay, Andrew? Yes,
No, I'm good.
I'm sorry, Mom.
This has to do with Dan Johnson, that's what we want.
But let me stop, Barbara. It got a lot to do with Dan Johnson, and let me tell you why, because if I'm not mistaken, somebody asked the question, which was Ben. Ben asked the question, how and why was this rule put in place?
It didn't have anything to do with Dan Johnson.
Okay, I don't know, I didn't bring up Dan Johnson.
Dan Johnson did something else.
Right. I know what Dan Johnson did to my predecessor, so I know about that.
Can I offer the thought that I think we've had a really robust conversation on this? There's a motion on the table to put this into the record, so we can talk about it more later. And there's some other things we need to do on the agenda tonight, so if we could, I'd love to move on the motion on the table and then move on to those other things. Does that sound reasonable?
My vice chair, got anything? Before we move on? Right. Everybody sure? All right. So, Ernie, you got the floor.
Oh, we're done with the meeting.
No, we ain't
Just
done
slide
yet.
out of here.
All right.
I'm gonna get off easy.
No, you didn't get that easy, buddy.
Kyle's gone. Don't keep making too much. Oh, security. All right. You want to see what you want to do?
Hey, man.
So real old picture real quick. I found this on Facebook. This looks like a councilman.
That's cute.
You can see those legs from anywhere. can't you?
I've been known to do that.
Another one,
I keep going next to my car.
this in the plan. Our congressman got a ground rule double last night. I don't know if y'all saw that in a congressional baseball game. Democrats have lost 6 straight years in a row, but he was the catcher, and I think it was maybe 3 for 4 or something like that. Had ground rule double. Hit on the warning track and bounced over the fence at the Nat Stadium. So usually he comes around in August. I'll get a video going for that one.
Aaron's looking to inspire everybody on the volleyball game.
Yes, that's at the end of the presentation.
Training.
We can talk about that.
Been ready to train them.
Well, because you all have got some sort of Beargrass Creek
Cancel.
thing that's been
Oh, no,
rescheduled.
we're
Seriously that morning,
Priorities.
so, yeah.
Priorities.
Yeah, right. Couple of appropriations. JP, I think, has got 3 of these. Need a little bit more money on old business. The TIF down in Nulu, that was a change to incorporate a hotel and a few other things, is also on old business. Parks and Sustainability made some changes to how golf course greens fees will be captured. Yes, sir, Mr. President.
I believe,
Yes.
I believe that is gonna be moved to consent calendar. Jennifer, am I wrong about that?
Are you okay with that? Okay. Planning and zoning has 3 items on old business. The first one is the Jevadon color factory that's being rezoned. You all want to discuss that, or do you want to say?
Anybody have any problems with that? Anybody have any issues with that? I think we're gonna have some second floor votes. I think we're gonna get there anyway, but just making sure that everybody's.
The third one was just a change to a duplex on Papalogo Road, and this is a Chick-fil-A that required a revised detailed development plan.
Yeah, that one, sorry, that one was a 8-0 or something at planning commission, but because
Council standard binding element.
Diane Ellen was on, it was brought back.
I mean, it had been rezoned 2 or 3 times in the last couple of years. Administrative search warrants that had been in committee for several weeks was amended. This would allow like code enforcement agents and other officers to petition a court for different administrative warrants. And then the safe havens ordinance came out 161. So we'll talk about that.
I just wanted to say that we've got an amendment in the system for this tonight. It just cleans up some language and some other things where there were things that were asked for by people in the community to add protections for advocacy organizations. Even if you're not going to vote on the main motion, I would appreciate the supports that we're talking about, the legislation we want to be talking about.
Marcus?
Yeah, JB, I asked you this before committee, I'll ask you again tonight to pull your sponsorship. I mean, I think this piece of legislation is irresponsible. I think we clearly know it's gonna fail overwhelmingly tonight. I would ask you not to hand Frank Simon's people a victory, which is what it's gonna be perceived, and folks out in the public that are not following the debate and see us vote tonight not to make Louisville safe haven, they just see that headline and the damage that it does to them. I would respectfully ask you to pull your sponsorship and not go down an ill-fated path.
Third one?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say about that is, again, fairness failed several times before it passed, which is the point I've made repeatedly. More importantly, I know that you see it as irresponsible. You said that on the committee floor. That's fine. That can roll off my back. That doesn't bother me to say that about myself. But it was trans people who wrote this. It's trans people who have organized for this. Trans people who have worked very hard, garnering the community support. Thousands of people have signed the support letter. 36 organizations, 36 businesses. I'm not going to withdraw my sponsorship. People are going to vote how they're going to vote. I don't plan to excoriate anyone for their votes. But I think it would be an abdication of my responsibility to these people to pull the rug out from underneath them here at this last minute.
Speaking of the safe haven, we have 6 people tonight speaking on that issue, 3 for, 3 against. And then we have 3 people coming down speaking against the massage parlor ordinance. You'd think that was a little business as well. And then the supplies overseas, Lee Sears is the other 10th speaker. New business is littered with all kinds of stuff. Appropriations to several different things. Councilwoman McCraney's got a big one back there for a St. Matthew's Park called Warwick Park, and a new pavilion that they want to have there. St. Joe's is in the 177th year. And then a couple other smaller appropriations. Riverview Independence Festival, that's going to be a little bit earlier this year and not 4th of July weekend, and then a couple other appropriations. Budget, operating, capital, Louisville tourism budget, which has to be annually approved. TARC's budget, which has to be annually approved. Norton Healthcare has what are called health system revenue bonds, but I think that's a fancy name for an IRB. So we're familiar with the Churchill IRB, same thing. We'll see one of those here in a few minutes as well at another committee. And then subclassifications of USD real property. That's the issue that was snuck into House Bill 607.
Not in there?
Well,
They
How it
decided
fits
to
in
put
with
it up
those.
with that omnibus bill or whatever, yes.
that's gonna separate, and you've got something on new business in another committee. Do you anticipate doing that this year?
So it's broken into two pieces. This first piece, and I know we had a conversation about that, and we can talk more about it, just about messaging. But the first piece that was filed here on new business is just to say, now that the state has passed the enabling legislation, that we're acknowledging that we want to do something with that enabling legislation. And that's what this first piece does, basically says we're going to do. And then followed up after public comment and a lot of other things, that gets as many people's opinion on it as possible. We're not, I mean, it's complex, right? Then we will do a second piece of legislation that talks about the specifics of what this looks like and what it does. But this first piece is really just administrative. It's saying now that they've enabled it, we're going to do something.
There was an appropriation over here for a geothermal HVAC system, so we might want to think about that.
For this room.
For
For this
room.
room.
So,
Split system.
Laura will know this, she used to work in the revenue cabinet. We actually adopt our property tax rates very, very late. Most suburban cities have already adopted their property tax rates already, or will with their budget adoption. So that's why I was asking if you foresaw as doing it.
So some of those conversations are gonna be with PDA, Department of Revenue, all the people that will have a hand in that. And so I think the timing will somewhat be determined by those conversations.
Was that a good place to talk about surplus properties?
No. I don't think so. On my first response, no, but we can do that.
And then Reed has a MSD rate calculation. Right now, the MSD board may increase their rate up to 7%, which means 6.99%. For years, it was 6.99% or 6.9%. I think now, this year, it was 2.9, I believe. This would change their calculation to whatever the consumer price index is, plus 1%. So it just depends on what that CPI is, plus 1% is the maximum rate that they could increase the MSD rate. A ton of appointments. As you'll see, a couple of important boards, Civilian Review Board, Landmarks, and the Police Merit Board.
And the
That's
Bardstown Road overlay, so to say.
And the Bardstown Road, yeah. The Police Merit Board disciplines LMPD officers, so I think that's a little bit more important than Bardstown. And then a whole host of fire district appointments as well. Labor and Economic Development has a TIF, an IRB, and a surplus property and conveyance of such property to this new new development group. Those are gonna be these hotels and multifamily housing right by the slugger field. And so all of that is on Labor and Economics agenda, along with the ASME library contract and a resolution for Medicaid. I don't know what the term is. They go out and get Medicaid funding and receive a percentage of that.
Correct.
From that. New business on planning and zoning, one change or down zoning on Baxter Avenue, not too far away. Wolf Pin Branch Road runs from River Road out near Prospect all the way to Chamberlain Lane, which would be kind of in through Green Springs, et cetera, that way over 42.
I think it's just more than North Commons.
Yeah, because it wiggles back in there really. And then Marcus has got a really good piece of legislation that would require CUP applicants to be up to date on their taxes as well as their liens. Some of you all might remember that the Don Flood passed that law that said if you were doing change of use, you had to be updated on your taxes and your liens. This would just add CUP applicants to it. And then Councilwoman Hawkins has a really good piece of legislation, kind of along those same vein, that you need to be compliant, you need to be NDF compliant in order to get a parks permit or a facilities permit. Same line of thinking. I wish that was for everything. You know, actually, my dad got that state law passed years ago with Denver Bubble when he went to Frankfurt, that ABC applicants would have to be annually up to date with their taxes, and it makes sense. It's a no-brainer. Public safety, a little bit of an amendment to the secondary metal recyclers. Remember Kevin Kramer's big thing? There was a state law in House Bill 291 that requires them to have a home address and a few color, make, model of the vehicle. And then several condemnation actions, one in District 3, a couple in 12. And then Mermaid Lane, which is kind of an interesting, weird lane that's near the Ford Chamberlain Lane plant. And they're wanting to kind of, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's actually, you were.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my understanding is basically there's some dispute of like it's a dead end road, it runs right next to Ford. There used to be a neighborhood there. Ford has bought all of the properties, so they own all of the surrounding property. But this road sort of runs through there. It used to be a dead end, and then I think somebody manually cut a connector, a gravel path to another road that goes in there. They've leveled all the houses. This is where Ford is expanding, and so closing this road, this is sort of a multi-step process, right? First, we have to get control of this, and then we will close it, I think, and then surplus it. It's probably the three steps.
So right now, if you look on Logic, it looks like it connects to Collins Lane, but it actually isn't part of the Collins Lane right of way. It's a separate parcel that has been used publicly since at least 1921. So the cleanest way to do this is to use the statute that allows us to take it and claim it as a public way because it's been used for more than 5 years by members of the public. But ultimately, it would then be as part of the rezoning as the other side of the road, they would close it and then half would go to each side.
Yeah, and I'll just add, so this road is entirely encompassed by the Ford expansion. It's not actually a road that anybody would use to get anywhere. I mean,
It's a dead end.
Dead end. Used to go to houses. Those houses have been leveled. We're not serious.
So it's going to be a consent calendar item at our next meeting. I wanted to go over several bills real fast that the General Assembly passed. In your handout there, I've got several different pages, but I wanted to just go over a few that I had highlighted there. Automated data cameras. The state law now is that they can only retain that information for 90 days. So it's not just ACLU, not to pick on you all, but it's the Tea Party as well, or whatever they're calling themselves nowadays, that have issues with the retention of that. House Bill 311, I mentioned this to LA's. Railroads now have to clear and remove along their right-of-way 250 feet from any intersection. And if they don't do it, we can do it and charge them for that. That's because, and remember, Congressman McGarvey was here and said that in order to get help with railroads, you need God's help or something like that to that effect. This is a step in the right direction. So House Bill 311.
They don't pay it because why would they?
Well, you can take them
Great,
into court.
great
Now
stuff,
we
great
got
stuff
the
already.
county attorney's office taking them into court, enforce law. The other one, small purchase orders, was increased from $40,000 to $50,000. So you'll see less, lower contracts. This one's a little bit more complicated about sunsetting the TIF and state participation in TIFs. That is closing. Local TIFs would still be permissible, for our own little tax base, but anything that's broader than that encompasses state revenues, are not going to be established going forward. We can now purchase used vehicles instead of having to go and buy marketplace vehicles. This could save us literally a lot of money, especially for police cars and others. We don't have to do it. Yes, sir.
And I'm sorry, can we go back? When I read what's written there, I read it as it was supposed to expire in 26, but now it's been extended to 28. Am I misreading that?
It's a limited extension for just the state signature project, so there's 3 levels of state.
One part.
So, right, so the signature would be like a one part, but what they have is while it's extended through December 31st, they changed who can apply beginning now. So really, it's a very limited pool that could apply for a state signature TIF between now and December 31st. It still allows, separate from that, There's the arena TIF that allows some carve-outs like the baseball legislation. That's not impacted by this, so that's the one thing that still could be in play. But really effectively, state participation through ad valorem or mixed use is gone. Signature is now limited going forward. The two that are in the pipeline, like One Park for final approval and New Blue Crossing tonight, will finish out, but there really isn't going to be something new to be able to be introduced, except if you meet these really limited conditions between now and December 31st.
Yeah, I'm curious from a policy perspective. I mean,
Why do they do that?
yeah, why? I mean, it's
Because
certainly a
number
good way
one,
for them to participate.
The state has reduced their income tax to less than 3%. Most of these agreements, you had state income tax rates that were based on 20 or 30 years at a much higher rate.
Yeah.
The state's underwater. The state's been supplementing their TIFs now for the last two biennial budgets.
They've had a couple of adjustments,
Yeah.
yeah, for the TIFs that had an income tax component. Not all of them do. I mean, some
But
of
the
them are more
signatures-
heavily dependent on sales tax, for example.
Yes. Yeah. So that's kind of the issue. Allow unclaimed bodies to be cremated. That's been a big issue since Mark Fox was here trying to get some state senators done. That's gonna save us a lot of money going forward. Establish penalties for violating state law for using tax dollar or public resources for or against ballot amendments. You all remember that there was a lot of school systems that were anti the proposed constitutional amendment a few years ago. So they have put in state law, you cannot do that. Criminalizes the harassment of or obstruction of first responders, and if they're doing official duty, a 25-foot buffer zone around the first responders. I'm gonna ask some of the cops tonight when they come and see if they know about that and see how they're gonna implement that. I don't know if they just kind of yell official, and then we've got to get 25 feet. I don't know how that's gonna be done, so, yes, ma'am.
At what point or where is it going to be discussed that Middletown has a $25 million regional first responders facility being built? And Louisville is simultaneously building one? If it's for regional
I know, I don't understand that
responders,
either.
then why are we bothered?
So there was a $25 million
I'm just trying to figure out
appropriation.
like, when we bring this up.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer. So I think they're two different, I can't answer why we're building two, right? But they are gonna serve two different purposes. The one that's being built in Middletown is basically shooting range. There's no driving facilities, and I think the one the state allocated money for us is primarily a driving track center.
That's asinine, but okay.
My understanding here is similar to that, is that Middletown facility will be used by other agencies throughout the state, that the LMPD facility would just be used by.
I don't think that's
No,
I think ours is regional.
I mean,
Yeah.
right, right,
But ours is
yeah.
regional too. I mean, I think that's why we got the state monies, because Fuller County, et cetera, would use the driving track.
That's what we've been told.
Well,
I mean, if you just go down a few more miles, you reach Ohio Valley, and they've got a quarter-mile drag straight down there, it's one of the nicest in the country. But, yeah,
They want $25 million worth of shooting range, that's what, I heard that.
I mean, it's not just.
Yeah,
That's
they're gonna have simulated,
headquarters.
they're gonna have simulated like race and stuff, it's gonna be like Top City in Atlanta.
Yeah.
but yeah, and then,
The piece of land for that 25 million is not as big as a piece of land that the 5 million. Where is it located? Is
Right
it
off English
Dixie?
Station, right off English Station.
No, she means the other one.
Oh,
Is that where they
Dixie.
could have put a data center, but they passed a moratorium, and so they said, well, we can't do this anymore, so now we'll put in a first responder facility? Rhetorical question, we can move on.
and county attorneys, commonwealth attorneys, and some of Earl's colleagues to the Safe at Home program that hides your addresses and home addresses.
Like, judges have everybody has it, we don't have this county.
Yeah, I think we do. We're covered under anti-doxing laws. So would that be, that'd be right?
No, we found, our stuff is public.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
I brought my.
Well, finance.
Well, yeah. So, your campaign finance doesn't have to list your address. Now, when you file paperwork to run for election, you gotta file for your address. But this is talking about, you know, I'll give you an example. We don't release any type of home addresses for you all. And that's not searchable, that's how you open records requestable anymore, it's everything where it used to be until the docs. We can just kind of cover that real quick, and then the bright side volleyball, or do you want to see that? This is just one to come, and then the bright side tournament, July 18th.
Will Bright Side exist after this budget?
Well, they have an executive director, it was just announced, I think, today.
Yeah. Yep. Angela Richardson, she's been with Public Works for about 15, 17 years.
Okay. That's all I've got. And there's no cows, and there's no communications.
Motion to adjourn.
15, yes.
Yep. Get an update. Hold on. Does anybody get anything really quick? Anything going on in anybody's history? All right.
Nothing happened at all. Nothing to see here.
No, yeah, all of the sidewalks.
Si no haces nada más.
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 Si no haces nada más.